Own lives, and ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. I nearly knocked the pulpit over. Well, you might have noticed, if you've been part of Grace for a while, you might have noticed that over the last few years we stopped holding Vision Sundays. Now, the thinking behind that was that since God hadn't changed his mind about the direction that Grace was headed in, we really didn't need to strain our brain at the beginning of each year, at the start of each year, to come up with something exciting to try and capture the heart of our church. After all, we were already doing a whole heap of stuff and getting runs on the board. And I also didn't want to create a need for constant stimulation into your experience of faith. Because the reality of life is that it's a marathon and not a sprint, and we want to set you up to last for the long haul and not be someone who gives up when something else grabs your attention. However, in light of the times that we're currently living in, they're a little bit shaky for some, and all of the changes that we've been through as a church over the past 5 years, I thought it would be good to directly talk into what I believe this year could hold for each of us individually and all of us corporately. We have a saying here at Grace, and many of the older Graces would know the saying, that goes, the church is as good as I get. And the grammar isn't all that great, but the thinking behind that statement was that the church collectively is a reflection of each of our lives together. Therefore, we are as good as the church gets. So if you want to look at the church is as good as you. So there's really no need to look at the church and be critical of the church, because really, when you're being critical of the church, you're being critical of you, because the church is us together. Yeah. So we are the church. It's too easy in our shift the blame society to abdicate our personal responsibility for our lives and the church that we find ourselves in. And we've never played that game here at Grace, and we don't intend to start playing it in the future. So your growth and the growth of those around you should be a priority, because not only does the church depend on it, so does your world. Because the greatest example of Jesus on the planet that your world gets to see is found in the way that his church behaves amongst itself and toward them. And when we break it down even further, the way each of us behave personally with those around us, at home, at work, when we're on holidays, when we're out for a night with our mates, our behaviour is what the world sees. And they make up their mind about the God we serve and how he thinks about them by the actions they observe. I felt a strong leaning toward encouraging each of us individually this year to make 2021 a year where we make measurable progress in our lives, where we become a better version of the person we were by the end of the year than the person we were when we started the year off. I believe that the church needs to get better, which means you and I need to get better. The church today is coming under increasing scrutiny by the world, and our greatest defence against that is consistent, loving behaviour, regardless of what comes against us. And who knows that to be consistently loving isn't easy. It requires some growth in our lives. It requires some change. And now I think that you're all pretty amazing already, but all of us have areas that we can improve in. So the thing that's burning in my heart this year that I want to say to every one of us is, be intentional about your own personal growth. Aim to finish this year a better person than you were when you started. This year will shape you. This year will bring challenges that will ask questions of your character. This year will present to you opportunities to shine. And this year will end and never come again. The time is going to pass, whether you make the most of it or simply let it slide through your fingers. So my encouragement is that you make the most of it. To live intentionally doesn't require all that much. Just a simple thought at the start of each day to make the day count. To add it to your tally of days where you responded and acted faithfully and kindly. All growth in our lives takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. It's also not rocket science. It's actually quite simple. Here's my definition of what positive growth is. Positive growth is an adaptive response to stress. Intellectually, physically, emotionally, or spiritually. It doesn't matter. Whenever you face difficulties or challenges in your life, or situations where you don't know enough, or struggle to cope emotionally or physically, you have an opportunity to grow stronger, to grow in your knowledge and understanding, to grow in your character. Growth is triggered when you find yourself in a situation that you're struggling to cope with, whether that's from a lack of strength, a lack of knowledge, a lack of confidence, or a lack of internal resilience. It's how God designed us. Growth is all about your body's ability to adapt and change and become stronger over time. And stress, 9 times out of 10, is the trigger. Let me give you an example. If you want to become, some of you who may have heard me talk about this in the past, if you want to become physically stronger at the gym, you have to lift weights that are difficult to handle, that put some stress on your body. Your body will then adapt by becoming stronger so you can cope. If you want to run 10 kilometres, see a psychiatrist. If you want to run 10 kilometres, you start off by jogging 1 kilometre and continue to push through the discomfort and stress it causes in your body, and by doing so, you end up triggering your body's adaptive response, which will then cause your body to become stronger along with your cardiovascular system, so that the stress you're facing at the start of your training becomes more manageable the more you do it. It's natural. It's automatic. It's the way we've been created. You don't magically become a more patient dad. We wish that was the case. You find yourselves in situations that try your patience, and you push through, kicking off your adaptive response to stress that those situations cause you, and over time you become more emotionally stronger and better able to cope with situations that try your patience. Now, the Bible is full of encouragement to grow, to change, to become better, to leave behind the old and grow into the new. And this is where we get a little bit confused at times. Your value and worth in God's eyes is not dependent on your behaviour, but rather your relationship with Him. Your value and worth from God's perspective is settled. He loves you, warts and all. But He loves you too much to leave you where He found you. You will find all throughout your Christian walk that the Holy Spirit will constantly nudge you to become a better version of yourself, and in the process, loving you completely. It's why we can be totally secure in God's love for us and dissatisfied with where we're at the same time without it becoming a major issue. It allows us to admit our faults without getting mired down in self-loathing. See, when you understand that you have worth and you have value and it's not dependent upon your behaviour, you can then forget about yourself and forget about all the excuses you make to justify that you're a valuable person, and start to actually deal with some of the issues that you've been carrying along in your life without feeling that you're useless and hopeless. And that's the incredible thing that I have found in my own life personally about God's love. God can point His finger at areas in my life and say, that needs to be fixed up, that needs to be fixed up, and yet not make me feel bad about myself because He loves me completely. When other people want to point out the things that are wrong in my life, I feel like they're having a go at me, and I have to be defensive. I have to get all defensive. But when God points stuff out, you know that when God points stuff out, He's God, He knows. But you don't feel bad about yourself because you know that you're totally and completely accepted and loved by Him. Personal growth is our responsibility. I don't believe that God manufactures situations to stress you. I think the journey of life leads us through those times without God having to lift a finger. He does, however, give us tools that will help us to adapt to the stress and grow stronger as we pass through those situations. Firstly, he has promised that he will always be with us, and not only with us, in us. That's a fairly major distinction there. As far back as the prophet Ezekiel in the Old Testament, God promised us that he would not just be with us. I mean, God is everywhere. That's what the Bible says. God is everywhere at once. That's called, what? Omnipresent. But he promises us that he will actually be in us. Ezekiel 30, I haven't put it up yet. Ezekiel 36, verse 27. And I will put my spirit in you so that you will follow my decrees and be careful to obey my regulations. Now, Ezekiel spoke this before it had actually happened. We're living in the time where Jesus sent the Holy Spirit, who now lives in all of those who are following Jesus. Jesus gave a similar promise to Ezekiel 36 to his disciples, who we are all direct descendants of, in John 14, 15 to 17. If you love me, obey my commandments, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate who will never leave you. He is the Holy Spirit who leads into all truth. The world cannot receive him because it isn't looking for him and doesn't recognize him. But you know him because he lives with you now and later will be in you. When you give your life to God, he promises to come and live with you in a very personal way. When we live with the understanding that God is in us, it's amazing the difference it makes to our courage when facing the challenge of growth in tough situations. I used to, when I was younger, when I was a youth pastor, I used to get young people, and I did it in church once, and I might have even done it at Grace when I first started coming on here. But I used to do this little exercise where I get people to look at themselves and say, Jesus is in me. Jesus is in me. There is something powerful when you realise that Jesus himself, through the Holy Spirit, is living in you. I mean, what can man do to you if God is with you? What situation will you face that you can't overcome if God is here? Our problem is we forget. We're really good at forgetting that Jesus is with us. Or we start to think that Jesus is really far away and we can't reach him, he can't hear us. But if we realised the truth that he lives inside of us, and every now and again just look down to ourselves and say, Jesus is in here. I'm sure we change the way we behave sometimes. If we realise Jesus is here right now in me. But especially for those times where you're really struggling to cope, or you're really finding the situation you're in really difficult, looking at yourself and saying, Jesus is in me, can bring courage into your heart, which will then enable you to persevere until you see the situation change. Secondly, the area that most of us stumble in when dealing with stress is the area of our emotions and the way they impact on our thinking. Maintaining our emotional equilibrium is crucial when trying to get the most out of the growth-producing situation that we find ourselves in. When I joined the Army during boot camp, our PTIs, physical training instructors, love telling us that humans only use 60% of their capacity before they packed in, before calling it quits. The issue, they said, wasn't in our physical strength, but our mental and emotional capacity. So they did everything that they could to increase our capacity to persevere, and they quite enjoyed it. We hated it, but they enjoyed it. Now, I've always said that the biggest benefit I gained from my time as an infantry soldier was the development of my mental and emotional capacity, the ability to persevere when I wanted to quit. When our church was going through our wilderness years, the 5.5 years that we spent in Mornington, I found the weight of that experience extremely taxing, both mentally and emotionally. I wasn't under a huge amount of physical stress, but the frustration, the disappointment of hopes and dreams seemingly stagnating, the sadness of seeing people leave us, all affected me emotionally and mentally, and they threatened to derail the growth that God was out working through that time. I had to hold it together, and in doing so, the stress I was under caused me to grow. Now when I look back on that time, because it's 5 years ago when we went through that, when I look back on that time, I thank God for that period of time in my life. If it was to happen again, I'd say thank you very much, I'm out of here. It's like, but at the time I hated it. When I look back on it now, I go, I'm really glad that we didn't stop moving forward individually and also corporately as a church. I'm really glad that we persevered through that season, because that season prepared us for the season that we're currently in. It changed us. It grew us. And I know for me personally as a leader, it was very, very instrumental in changing me and making me the person that I am today. It was a tough time. It was a hard time. It was an emotional time. It was a mentally draining time. But because we didn't quit, because we persevered through it, it brought about growth. How does God help us to manage our emotions and our mental state? First of all, what God does is he brings clarity to the issue. He clearly states that it's crucial we keep watch over our emotions and our thinking, and in doing so, lets us in on a secret that so many of our contemporaries seem to have forgotten. And that is, it's not what happens to you, but what happens in you that determines the eventual outcome of your life, your emotional and mental state. And you're in control of that. In Proverbs 4:23, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Not a truer word has been spoken. It's not your parents, your spouse, your luck or your abilities that determine the outcome of your life. It's what you allow to control the state of your heart that steers your ship. Now, all of that doesn't mean that I don't feel compassion when I hear people's stories. I have heard some terrible stories that have made me want to go and beat up the world on behalf of some people. They've been terribly hard done by. I understand that. But gaining justice is only the tip of the iceberg. What really matters is what's happening on the inside of that person. And they need to be encouraged to persevere and to deal with their thinking and not allow it to lead them away from their God-given destiny. The Apostle Paul gave us some excellent advice in regard to our inner world when he said in Philippians 4:8, "And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honourable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise." Now, I know that's how all of you think all the time. That's all you ever think. But just imagine, I want you to do a bit of an exercise with me here. Imagine for a moment what it would be like if our thoughts were reflected in our physical bodies over time. So whenever you had a bad thought, you became more hunched over in your posture. Your hair became lifeless and thin. Your skin broke out in sores. Your teeth went yellow and started falling out. Your eyes became cloudy and your body odour became stronger. I put that in for the men, all right? Your body odour became stronger. But if you had good thoughts, you stood up straighter. Your body became stronger. Your hair started to shine. Your teeth became straight and white. And there was a glow to your skin. Do you think, if that was the case, that you would pay close attention to what you thought if that was the case? Well, guess what? That's exactly what happens to the inner you, dependent on the thoughts and emotions that consume you. And here's the tragedy. It doesn't matter what external force instigated that thinking. It doesn't matter if you're the victim of somebody else's bad treatment to you. Those thoughts will still have a detrimental effect on the inside, on you. To make progress and grow is always going to cost you, but it's so much harder when you don't protect your thinking and guard your heart. Third and final point, to make 2021 a year of personal growth, don't give up. Now, it sounds easy to say, but it's the thing that separates those who succeed and those who don't. When we started working on the Grace Centre, I was kind of horrified at the state of the building. Now, I'm not a tradie, but even I could tell that the building should have been condemned. And in fact, I remember during the first couple of months that we bought the building, I'm thinking, why didn't somebody come along and burn it down? You know, we could have just started from scratch. Because the more we got into that building, the more we realised it was a safety trap. For starters, it was just falling apart. The maintenance hadn't been done. It should have been shut down. So we didn't shut it down. We started meeting there, didn't we? We started doing stuff in the building. But we started to work at it. And it was a huge job that we had set ourselves to tackle. Because we had no money in the bank. We just had willing hearts to see something change. And inch by inch, step by step, we've made progress. And this year, we've finally gotten over the 5-year hump. That's an interesting beep on a phone. But this year, we finally got over the 5-year hump. When we first started fixing it up, you know, people, we bought this building, it's great. And they go, well, when's it going to be ready? You know, when's it going to be finished? And I say, well, look, come back in 5 to 10 years. And we'll have something to show you. But it ain't going to be happening. You won't see much happen in the first 12 months. Well, last November marked 5 years. And last November was when we finished the foyer, the toilets, the brand new toilets, and the disabled parking out the front. Now we've got the big room, we've got the offices, and we've got that area. So we're halfway there. We still have the whole back part of the building to fix up. But the whole front of it is now fixed. And you can start to see that the effort that we've been putting in has actually ended up with a lovely facility. So we're halfway there. We're over the hump. Now there's still lots to do and years of consistent work ahead of us. I had no grey in my beard when we started this. Actually I did. I probably did. No, I shouldn't lie in church, should I? I didn't have this much grey. It's going white now. Well, we've still got some years ahead of us, but we now have a track record. We now have some history that we can pull out to encourage ourselves when we hit the next obstacle. Because that's the thing about life. You're always hitting obstacles. There's always things that will come across your path that offer you opportunities to grow. 2 Chronicles 15:7. But as for you, be strong and do not give up, for your work will be rewarded. A promise from God. Matthew 7:7-8. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks the door will be opened. The key thing there is you've got to keep on asking, you've got to keep on knocking, you've got to keep on seeking, and you will get there. Hebrews 12:1-3. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. And let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. Now he is seated in the place of honour beside God's throne. Think of all the hostility he endured from sinful people, then you won't become weary and give up. If it happened to Jesus, it's going to happen to us. It wasn't easy for Jesus. It's not going to be easy for you and I. But if we persevere and push through, then the situations that we're facing at the moment, the difficulties that we're facing at the moment, can become the very thing that creates a wonderful future for us. Now, one of the things that has been quite important, and this is a little bit of a side note, in keeping us on track as a church during the last 5 years, has involved 2 key components which I know many of us share. And it's the why. Why have we done what we've done? And the first one, I believe, the first one is that I believe, and I know that many of us, all of it, well, the ones who have been on the journey with us, believe that the renovation of the centre is slowly becoming a powerful statement of hope for our community. As they see the old pub being given a new lease of life, they can believe that their future can be greater than their past. And secondly, I'm passionate about handing on to our next generation a legacy that will help them bring Jesus to the very heart of our community. Because that's where Jesus wants to be. Jesus doesn't want to be on the periphery. He doesn't want to be on the outskirts of the community. He wants to be in the very heart of the community. And it seems to me that when I look across Australia, when I look across churches in Australia, and I look across what we've been trying to do for a long, long time, churches have sat on the outside of their communities. They've done good work. They've looked after each other. They've been good people. But I haven't seen too many churches, especially in our current day and age, who are absolutely ensconced in the centre of their community. And that's what we at Grace want to see happen. We want to see our church being such an integral part of our community that if we were to close our doors, everybody in the community would notice. And I think that's one of the tests that all churches should be asking of themselves. If we were to close our doors, would anybody even notice we were gone? And at the moment, because of what we've been doing at the Grace Centre and the attitude that we have had, which is we're not setting up programs for ourselves, but we are endeavouring as much as we can to serve what is currently happening in our community, we have, over the last 5 years, become an integral part of our community. People know about us. You go around to any of the major community organisations and you say, do you know about Grace Church? They say, oh yeah, we know all about Grace Church. They've got the Grace Centre down there. We have had meetings there. We've used that facility. If you were to go and speak to council in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to have it's taken us 5 years. How slow can you be? But we're going to have an opening. So we're going to have an official opening during the week for all of the big wigs and those people. And then we're going to have our church. We're going to have a celebration on the weekend where we're going to have our official opening of the Grace Centre. And we've got some wonderful guests who are really keen to come along and be part of it. It's the whole COVID thing. That's the issue that we've got at the moment, because you've got to have limited numbers of people in that facility. When our church meets there, we won't care about COVID. We'll just meet there and walk in and out and walk around, all that sort of stuff. But we've got some very, very significant people who will be coming along, who have been supportive of what we've been doing over these last years, who we've been able to build a relationship with, and who would consider us a significant force for good in our community. And that's absolutely wonderful. And that's what we want to leave to the next generation of leaders and Christians and to our young people who are rising up in our church. This idea that you actually can penetrate a community and be right at the very heart with the message that we have, which is God came, seek out and search for those who are lost, to love those who maybe will never ever love him back, but he still loves them. With a real Christianity that when the rubber hits the road is there for them. And to do that, you have to have presence. To do that, you've got to be involved. You have to have relationship. And we want to be able to hand over to the next generation a platform that they can then take even further than what we have. So for me, the why behind why we're doing the stuff out of the Grace Centre is, number one, is for the community to show them that there is hope, that their future can be greater than their past. And also so that we can hand on to the next generation a platform that can see what we have begun in our community really, really take off. Because I kind of think, this is just me, this is what I think about when I'm lying at home in bed. I kind of think that what we're doing here in this community is something that can be shared, not just for us, but can be shared in other communities right around our state and who knows even further afield. Because there aren't too many churches who have been willing to give up a building, been willing to give up a facility for the good of their community. There's not too many out there that do that. Most of them, if they buy a building, they then meet there and then they'll try to get people to come to them. There are not too many churches that I know of that focus completely on going out into the community and serving the community and helping them do what they're currently doing. And yet it's a really easy thing to do. And in the process of serving our community, what we have discovered is that the reputation of our church, which then directly impacts on the perception that people have of God, the God that we serve, is rising, which is what we all want. Who wants to be part of a church that nobody knows anything about except for Christians? Who wants to be part of an echo chamber where everybody around you is telling you you're doing a great job, but really the world's going to hell outside? I'd rather be part of a church that is firmly embedded in the community, because that's where I think Jesus wants to be. He loves his church. He gave his life up for his church, but he never expected his church just to live for itself. He always expected his church to get out there. And I think that there have been some models where people tried to get out to their community, but maybe they've gone about it the wrong way. I haven't seen too many that have worked very, very successfully. But I think the direction that we're going in, and that's not to say that we're better than anybody else. Please understand where I'm coming from. It takes all sorts to make licorice, right? It takes all sorts of different churches to reach all sorts of different people. But what we're doing has been working. It's been working really well. And I think in the future we'll have something that we'll be able to look back on and go, wow, that was amazing to be a part of that, which is what I want us to do. Question: what is your why? What is your why? Your why needs to be bigger than you. You will never reach your God-given potential if your primary focus is yourself. Why? Because it's too easy to get caught up pursuing comfort and the easy way out. That's what we do. We pursue comfort. And yet comfort, if you pursue comfort, that's not the pathway to growth. It's the opposite. It's easier to quit a marriage that's grown cold than to work at improving it. It's easier to stay late at work than head home and deal with a teenager who's out of control. It's easier to drown your sorrow in alcohol than deal with the underlying cause. But if your why is greater than you, it can be the thing that keeps you keeping on long enough to turn the corner. And when you do, in gaming terms, you'll level up. You'll grow. You'll be a better human than you were when you started. As I said right at the start of my message, I felt a strong leaning toward encouraging each of us individually this year to make 2021 a year where you make measurable progress in your lives, where you become a better version of you by the end of the year than the you were when you started the year off. This year, be intentional about your personal growth. Aim to finish the year a better person than you were when you started. For that to happen, you need all the help you can get. If you have God with you, you're already way ahead of the 8 ball. Just make sure that you don't keep trying to do it on your own. If you don't have God with you, then why don't you take a moment right now to invite him into your life.